Welcome to Seventh-day Christian Assembly for our midweek Bible study. We're glad to have you with us tonight. Trust that everything's going your way and that you're being as blessed as we are here. We're ready to have our Bible study, and we'll get started here in just a minute. We still got folks coming in, so we're getting feedback. So we'll have our prayer here in just a moment and get started on the Bible study. The stream is working, David.
Trust that everything is?
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've tested the stream and confirmed it is working. So we're glad to have you with us tonight. If you want to reach out to us, you can send me a text message on my cell phone, 865-382-8489, or you can send me an email, pastor@sdca.org. We're going to be answering some stumper questions. You ever had someone give you a question because they thought they could stump you and therefore make your belief system invalid somehow? Well, people like to do that, especially atheists, agnostics, and unbelievers of all stripes. But we're going to look at some of those tonight and apply some biblical answers to the questions that are given to us from a somewhat biblical perspective, because they mention things that are in the Bible. But before we get started, I'd like for us to pause for a word of prayer and ask God's blessing on the Bible study. Heavenly Father, please bless this study. We've come together to read your word, to reason together, Father, and try to have understanding and guidance. And we seek that from you, Father. Please open our hearts and minds to understand things, Father, and help us to be ready and able to share understanding with people. And help us, Father, not to answer foolish questions, Father, but for those who are sincere, let us be ready to give sincere answers. But Father, we just ask all these things. Be with any who might still be in transit here tonight, and with those who are listening to us online, alive tonight, Father, on the internet or on Facebook. So we just put all these things in your hand and ask them in the name of your Son and our King. Amen.
Amen. We've got 16 subscribers on YouTube now.
Yay. David says we have 16 subscribers on YouTube. That's awesome.
Not that many views, but that many
Subscribers. Yeah. Well, views are usually more than subscribers. More people will look at it than will subscribe. There is a principle in the scriptures about foolish questions. I don't want to start with that tonight. I want us to go to Proverbs chapter 13, and we're going to look at verse 16. And this tells us something about how we reveal who we are and what we know by how we act. And Brother Townsend, would you like to read Proverbs 13:16 for us?
Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool lays open his folly.
Lays open his folly. Huh, that's interesting. So there's another verse here I want us to see, and that's in Proverbs also, and that is Proverbs chapter 26 and verses 4 and 5. I want us to read Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5. And Sister Sheila, when you're able, if you would like to read those for us.
While she's looking that up, that previous verse that you mentioned made me remember saying from one of my school teachers. I don't know where she picked it up from. It's better to keep your mouth shut and let people think you're a fool than open it and remove all doubt.
Yeah. This is very true. I think we've all heard versions of that, and it's wisdom to hold that in our minds and try to act on that. So Sister Sheila, if you're ready, Proverbs 26, 4 and 5.
Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit.
Now, these two verses seem to be contradictory, don't they? Like they're disagreeing with each other. You see it that way? Anybody recognize that?
Yeah.
But what we're seeing here in verse 4, I saw something that was attributed to Mark Twain, and he says, never argue with a fool because onlookers may not be able to tell which is which.
I had a saying whenever I developed it when I was working for Comcast. If you find yourself arguing with a fool, there's two fools arguing.
I've heard another version of that says the man who finds himself arguing with a fool will soon find the fool is also likewise involved. They're both arguing with a fool.
I've heard, don't argue with a fool because he will beat you down and then beat you with experience.
Yeah, drag you down to his level and beat you with experience. Yeah, I've heard that one too. So,
I had, and that's a good one.
yeah, we're having a nice chuckle at some of these things. But the Bible tells us, and what's the difference between these two verses? One, he says, don't answer a fool in his folly, so that you're not like him. The other says, do answer him according to his folly, so he won't be wise in his own conceit. Well, it has to do with attitude and intent. If you get a stumper question intended to say that the Bible's irrelevant and you're a fool for believing, don't bother answering that guy. But if a guy says a foolish thing and can be reasoned with, you can answer him so that he won't think he's won the day with his argument. You can show him reason why his foolish idea is not right. And so that's how I see the difference in these two verses. But with that in mind,
Well, you'd have to have wisdom yourself to know which is which.
and we pray that God gives us wisdom and discernment. I've shared this. I was at a party. We were making tie-dye t-shirts, and this young man who was highly educated knew that my wife and I were there and that we're Christians. And he was across the room on the other side, and he blowhards out and says, that stupid story about Noah's Ark, just think about it. Why didn't the lions eat all the other animals? Why didn't anybody ever think of that? And I'm thinking,
Because God,
pick your battles. And that's one of the things we're going to deal with tonight, actually, one of the stumpers tonight. But, I thought to myself, pick your battles. He doesn't want to have a conversation. He's not reasonable and is not seeking to reason from the Scriptures. He just wants to disdain God and the Bible and say it's a bunch of garbage. So there was no point in discussing it with it, so I just let him go. He felt like, I'm sure, boy, I'll put that preacher in his place. Someday, God will open his heart and his mind to understand the truth, but it wasn't on that night, that summer night at the tie-dye party. Okay.
Well, he was so smart over thousands of years ago that occurred. Nobody but him had ever thought of that.
There you go. Why didn't anybody else ever think of that? Because he's that smart. Exactly. So, with that in mind, let's deal with this question. Why didn't the lions and tigers and predators eat the other animals on the ark? That's where we're going to start. We're going to go to Isaiah chapter 11, and we're going to read verses 6 through 9. And Brother Matt, it's your turn to read Isaiah 11, 6 through 9. What we're going to do here is this is a vision of what the world is going to be after Jesus comes back and in the millennial reign.
The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. The calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and the child and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, the young one shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play by the cobra's hole, and a weaned child shall put his hand on the viper's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Okay, now couple things I want you to note here. The cow and the bear shall graze. What does a cow graze on?
Grass.
Grass. He's out in the pasture chomping grass. This scripture says the bear is going to be doing that too. And then it said your young ones will lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like he eats what? Eats straw? Well, boy, they'll get all uppity about that. Oh, well, the fact of the matter is you don't understand the physiology of felines. Cats must have something called taurine, Taurine, in their diet. It's an amino acid that they can only get by the consumption of meat. So you just don't understand. Well, I would turn that around and say, I'm afraid maybe you don't understand God. Because God says this is going to happen. Let's go also in Isaiah chapter 65. Brother David, if you'll read Isaiah 65 and verse 25.
The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, and dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, says the Lord.
The wolf and lamb shall feed together. Now, I remember reading that Benjamin Franklin once said that democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. And I always got a chuckle out of that. Well, if the wolf and the lamb are eating together, it's not the wolf eating the lamb here. The wolf's going to be eating the same thing the lamb is. Well, why are we going through all this, Ken? That's in the future. That's in the kingdom of God. Now, let's go back to Genesis chapter 6. And we're going to read verse 21. Brother Phil, are you ready to read tonight?
6:21, okay.
Genesis 6:21.
Just the one verse.
Just the one.
And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them.
Now, this is a simple thing that gets overlooked a lot, I think. God gave Noah a lot of directions. He told him how to build the ark, how big to build it. I believe he also told him how the rooms inside would work and everything. But did you notice God says you're going to have to gather up food for you and them. Who's the them? If you look at the preceding verses, it's the animals. Now, does that mean that Noah gathered up lots of red meat for the tigers and lions and bears and all the different carnivores? No, if you read it, notice what it says. You gather up all that food and both you and they will be eating it. Everybody is going to have the same diet on the ark. Wow, how could that be? One of the interesting things, and I'll give credit to the Answers in Genesis website. They have some really good answers to questions on their website. And they deal with this idea of big cats especially. They pointed out that taurine in the big cat's diet, they will not die if they don't eat it for a few months. Now, is that their regular diet? Yes. But there's also something to be considered. There are three things: hibernation, brumation, and torpor. Now, hibernation and brumation are a type of inactivity where the animal's body temperature, their heart rate, their metabolic rate, and their respiratory rate all drop. What does that mean? That means their heart beats one time a minute or whatever, and they breathe one time a minute or whatever, and their metabolic rate drops. That means they don't have to go to the bathroom 3 times a day. As a matter of fact, studies show that hibernating animals, their body system waits until they wake up and come out of hibernation for the waste to be expelled. They don't defecate or urinate on themselves. God's amazing, isn't He? He builds all these things into nature. Another factor that the fact that the reduced food consumption for both the vegetarian and carnivorous animals is that they, when they've gone into a state of hibernation, brumation, or torpor, means they don't have to eat every day. When a bear eats and gets fat all summer and fall, and they go into hibernation, how often do they come out to eat? They don't. They come out of hibernation eventually, but they don't come out and eat every day or every week. Their body, because the reduced metabolic rate, uses the fat that they've stored up. Now, the God that created animals to do that can also put the animals into a state of hibernation, brumation, or torpor. And when I give you these three, the difference is some mammals go into direct and complete hibernation, and some only go into brumation, and it's similar, but it's not as deep. They can actually be awakened from brumation. They're not in full hibernation. But their heart rates, their metabolic rate, their respiratory rate, they all drop. But certain species of warm-blooded animals undergo the process of hibernation, and brumation is used for something called ectotherms, or cold-blooded animals, specifically reptiles and amphibians. Have you ever seen, and you can look this up on the internet, you'll have no trouble finding it, what happens to alligators in the swamp when they get a terrible cold snap and the ice freezes on the surface of the swamp? They stick their noses up through the ice and they go into brumation. They stop their functioning and they are basically hypnotized. They're without activity. They don't eat, they don't chase, they're not predatory at that time. And torpor typically has to do with animals that are more readily alert and can be awakened from their quote-unquote sleep when they've gone virtually without anything to eat or drink for long periods of time. So there's a lot of animals, lots of mammals that go into hibernation, brumation, or torpor. Why are you going on about this, Kim? I got a notion they did not have to go and feed all those animals every day. I suspect some of the birds may have been more awake and more alert, but I suspect, this is my opinion, that many of these animals went into these semi-hibernation states and didn't eat, even though they might wake up and eat once a week or whatever. And so the problem with, how to feed them leads to the question of, what you gonna do with all that animal poop? If you go to Answers in Genesis, the ark there in Kentucky, they've got some elaborate designs. They think they could have dealt with this and recycled this animal waste and everything. It was very interesting. And it could be that that was true. It was speculation. But their bodies, once they slow down, they're not producing waste all the time, David.
Well, they could compost it. You know, we had, before 2 generations ago, a lot of places had outdoor privies.
Yes.
And it just accumulated until it got full, and they dug another and filled that one up with dirt.
Yep, you're right. And let the earth take care of it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But you would think now that it was the end of the world if you did that kind of thing. Well, you can still, down by the river, down in Tellico, they've still got outdoor bathrooms that are nothing but a concrete floor and a big plastic piece of pipe with a toilet seat on top of it. And the pipe goes down 15, 20 feet. And that's an outhouse.
Yeah.
Someday it'll fill up. But it'll take a while. But yes, composting is another thought. So this is a stumper that I think is not very effective. Do I stop believing in God and the Bible because somebody says, why didn't they ever think of that? The animals on the ark. David.
Well, they could have put them in different cages.
Absolutely. And again, if you go to the ark
Yeah.
up there, they show them in individual cubbies or
Yeah.
places in the side of the boat, you know. No reason to think that they wouldn't. Yes, sir.
Well, there was a change in their, I can't hardly the word to look for, but they all came to the ark voluntarily.
God brought them.
All of them
Yes.
came there voluntarily, so their nature, is what I was looking for,
Has already
was
changed.
already changed when they started in the ark.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. People get an idea that Noah and his sons traveled the world finding kangaroos and koalas and elephants and giraffes. No. All the animals on the ark were brought to them by God. God brought the animals. He says God brought them to them. So, and they were already changed because of that. On their own, giraffes don't line up side by side and walk to a person.
Well, if you have trouble believing that this happened because you don't understand how God done it, maybe they all drowned.
Well, and some of them, well, of course, he was a long time building the ark, but some of them had to travel for months to get there,
Oh, yeah.
or a year, maybe.
Yeah. There, and I am a firm believer in the kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
animals.
yeah. It wasn't
There
everybody.
wasn't, 1,000 breeds of dogs or 1,000 breeds of cats. There was a couple of cats,
Yeah.
a couple of dogs, and everybody's dog and cat today are descended from
Right.
those two pair. And there's lots and lots of variety. We can see that in humankind. Lots and lots of variety.
I'll give a perfect example of that. There's a breed, don't hear too much about them now, but they're called Beefmaster. And some boy, I believe, was in Colorado. Well, they had a certain set of standards, and they didn't deviate that. They had to calve within this period. Everything had to be just right. So they was talking, this one old boy, one time he said, they look pretty good, but the head don't look right. He said, "Buddy," he said, "we don't even care if they got a head or not, as long as they make meat." So the point being, they took the best characteristics from all different breeds, and then they forced it into a situation that had to fit their guidelines or whatever. I mean, if it was a day out, they cut them off. See, and when they got through with them, they had what they looked for.
That's a perfect,
Yeah.
perfect point, because that's how we got all the different varieties of parrots. That's how we got all the different varieties of dogs and cats. Becky and I used to have a Pomeranian. You think there were Pomeranians on the ark? I don't think
Probably
so.
not.
the neighbors have Great Dane, or had two Great Danes, now they got one. Great Danes, David and Sheila used to have Great Danes. They're enormous animals, but they're a dog.
Yeah.
Pomeranian, he weighed 6 pounds, and he was a dog.
Yeah.
Now, they both descended from the dogs that came off the ark, and I'm not altogether sure that maybe the wolves that came off the ark descended down into different kinds of dogs, because there's probably 2 wolves, 2 foxes. So, you know, there's a lot of variety, but God is amazing. We built all these varieties, and matter of fact, there are problems with it, and I mentioned the Pomeranian. Pomeranians and other small dogs like that, they have built-in characteristics that lend themselves to birth defects. They have hip dysplasia. And these little dogs, if he jumps off the couch wrong, oh, the hip goes out. Then you gotta take him to the vet, pop the hip back in. Now fortunately, Copper, our little dog, never, they said he had it, but he never threw his hip out.
Wow.
But yeah, it's just because you keep breeding and breeding and breeding. Same thing, the flat-nosed dogs. If you look at dogs, all the varieties of dogs, those flat-nosed dogs are the same critters as Afghan hounds. You ever notice what an Afghan hound looks like? They got a long pointed nose and long hair like Cher, right?
Like Cher.
Those are both dogs, and we made dogs varieties the way they are. All of the dogs originally came from the same fountainhead, the same lineage, just like all the humans came from the same lineage. One of the other stumpers I want us to deal with tonight is about human lineage. Here's another stumper. Where did Cain get his wife? Let's go to Genesis chapter 4. We'll read verses 16 through 17. Whose turn is it to read? Mine? Okay, I'll read. I got big words I can read. I'm going to read from the New King James. Where did Cain get his wife? It says, Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife. That means they had sexual relations. And she conceived and bore Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Now, I see questions in those verses besides the obvious one of where did Cain get his wife? They made a city with 3 people? I got to expect there were a lot more than just 3 people involved in a city. So now let's go to Genesis chapter 5, and let's read verses 1 through 5. And Sheila, if you want to read a couple or 3, and then Brother Phil pick it up.
This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam. In the day when they were created, and Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth.
And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died.
Okay, what I want you to see here, there's just a mention in verse 4 that Adam, besides Cain, Abel, and Seth, it says he had sons and daughters. And it doesn't give us their names. It just says he had sons and daughters. There were more people than Adam and Eve, Cain, Seth, Cain's wife, and his son Enoch. There are more people on the planet. There are more people. So why did we read this? I want to show that even though we do not know their names, Adam and Eve had other sons and they had daughters. Why is that important? Basic biology, folks. You got to have females to continue the species. So he and Eve had daughters. Ooh, Ken, what are you saying? That the first couples married their siblings? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Why is that so hard to believe? Well, everybody knows, Ken, that you can't marry your close relative. That causes problems with inbreeding, and you'll have all kinds of birth defects and trouble from that. Everybody knows that. Did you ever think about this? Mother Eve was taken directly from Adam's body. Okay, we know that story, Ken. That means they had the exact same DNA. No variance. And what did they do? They tried to fill up the world with children. They had lots of sons and daughters, even though their DNA was exactly the same. Not just close, but exactly the same. Well, Ken, wait a minute. Can you prove from the Bible that God would be okay with Cain and Seth and all the other male descendants of Adam and Eve marrying their sisters? Can you prove that? Well, it doesn't have to be sisters right away. I mean, initially, somebody married their sister. Later on, they could marry a niece or a cousin. But first of all, they had to marry their sisters. Now, can you prove that from the Bible, Ken? That God would be okay with that? Let's go to Genesis chapter 12, and we're going to read verses 10 through 13. Genesis chapter 12, 10 through 13. Who's our reader now? Brother Townsend.
Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai, his wife, Indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen, when the Egyptians see you, they will say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live.
Verse 13.
Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you.
Okay. This is Abram. Well, Ken, this is before he became Abraham. This is when he was still Abram. When you go and study this, you read this in the different Bible commentaries, they like to focus on the fact that Abram told a lie. And as I've said many times, half truth is a whole lie. That's what Mama used to tell me. Half truth is a whole lie. So was Abraham lying? Was he? Was he asking Sarai to lie for him? Now he said, You've got a beautiful countenance. That means she was real pretty. Now she's up in her 80s at this point, and I suspect that would be about like being in her 30s in today's world, as far as appearance, because they lived a lot longer. You know, she lived 140 years or so. So she was about middle age. She might have been a good-looking young mama. Well, she wasn't a mama yet, but they might have thought, pretty lady. So, was he lying? Let's go to Genesis chapter 20, and let's read verses 10 through 12. We're going to see that was before it was Abram. Now we're going to see after he becomes Abraham. I'm going to read 10 through 12, please, Matt.
Then Amalek said to Adam, What did you have in view that you have done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will kill me on the account of my wife. But indeed she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife.
It's funny, I was looking at one of the commentaries came right out and said she was his stepsister. No, she wasn't. She was his half-sister. They shared a father, but not a mother. So she was his half-sister. So he was being deceitful, but it wasn't an outright lie. She was his sister. Now remember, when Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for Isaac, where did he send him? He sent him back to his family, his own family. It's kind of like the old joke, the redneck goes to the family reunion looking for a wife. You know, well, Jeff Foxworthy gets a joke gets a laugh out of it. All right, you gave me a laugh, thank you. So when he sent his servant back to find a wife, God directed him to go back to Abraham's family. Remember, God was leading Eleazar, Abraham's servant. And Eleazar prayed to God, make this work out. And he even gave him a test. Let it be this way, that the one that says, I'll not only give you water, I'll water your camels too. That's a pretty big deal. Camels are thirsty. They drink a lot of water. Should be having some skin in the game, so to speak. So, he was sent back to Abraham's family. Isaac married Rebekah. She was the daughter of Bethuel, who was Nahor and Milcah's son. Thus, now you can find that in generation 24:15, but thus, Isaac married his first cousin once removed. First cousin once removed. Put another way, he married his aunt's granddaughter. So, Jacob married even closer relatives than Isaac did. He married his uncle's daughters, who were his first cousins. Jacob's mother was Rebekah. Rebekah's brother was Laban. And Genesis 29:10 tells us Laban's daughters were Leah and Rachel. He married his first cousin. In fact, it was not until the codification of the law at Sinai that we see prohibitions of certain relations marrying each other and procreating. Why is that, Brother David?
But this time they had probably started marrying the Egyptians and stuff, and no telling who else. When they come out of Egypt, they weren't no longer a pure race.
Well, you remember that Moses went out to Midian, and he married the daughter of the high priest of Midian, and then later he married an Ethiopian. So they were not as worried about staying in the race. You may be right. They may have been getting some DNA spread out and variety by marrying all these ways. But still, God didn't tell Jacob he couldn't marry those women. So let's go.
But they were still within the bloodline of Abraham and Isaac and stuff.
That's a perfect segue, because when Moses married Zipporah, she was also a descendant of Abraham. Because Raguel, which is his real name, we know him as, what's the name? The same as on the Hillbillies, Beverly Hillbillies. Jethro.
Jethro, yeah.
Yeah, Jethro's real name was Raguel. Jethro was his title. He was also a descendant of Abraham.
Abraham's daddy.
Yeah. So now, let's go, and they were descendants through Ishmael.
One more thing, when you was talking about Cain building the city, if there was several people, then they had left Seth and Adam and was following him.
Yeah, that's a good point. He may have garnered a following. Says, hey guys, come with me. I'm gonna go over here. We'll do this, and we'll do it our way. Time will tell. We may be able to know those things in the future, but that's a that's a reasonable supposition. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 18, and we're going to read verses 6 through 18. So let's read 3 apiece. Whose turn is it to read? Matt, or is it David's turn to read? Matt. Matt, if you'll read through, and then 3, and then David, and we'll get from 6 down to 18.
6 through 18, yeah, okay.
Chapter 18.
Chapter 18, verses 6 through 18. If you'll read 6, 7, and 8.
None of you shall approach anyone who is near of kin to him to uncover his nakedness. I am the Lord. The nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother you should not uncover. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife you shall not uncover. It is your father's nakedness.
The nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, whether born at home or elsewhere, their nakedness you shall not uncover. The nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, their nakedness you shall not uncover, for theirs is your own nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife's daughter, begotten by your father, she is your sister, you shall not uncover her nakedness.
Now, I like the Holman Christian Standard Version, because all this uncovering nakedness gets a little bit, it's awkward. It's awkward wording. I'll pick it up in verse 12 now. You're not to have sexual intercourse with your father's sister. She is your father's close relative. You're not to have sexual intercourse with your mother's sister, for she's your mother's close relative. You are not to shame your father's brother by coming near his wife to have sexual intercourse. She's your aunt. You're not to have sexual intercourse with your daughter-in-law. She's your son's wife. You're not to have sex with her. Now we're at verse 16.
Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, neither shalt thou take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are her near kinswomen. It is wickedness. Neither shalt thou take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness beside the other in her lifetime.
Okay, I'm going to read that one again to you out of the Holman Christian Standard. You're not to marry a woman as a rival to her sister and have sexual intercourse with her during her sister's lifetime. Don't marry two sisters at the same time. Who do we know that did that?
Well, he got tricked, didn't he? He thought he was with Rebecca.
He got tricked into it,
He got
but
tricked into it. I don't
Yeah.
think that was his intention.
no, he didn't intend. He intended to
That
get,
was the
not
father-in-law's
Rebecca, you
intention.
mean, not Rebecca.
Leah,
Rachel.
Rachel.
Rachel and Leah. So Jacob got two sisters and their same lifetime, and it was nothing but trouble their whole lives. They were in constant competition to have more babies and get more of his time and attention.
And that's why God instructed this to be written right here.
So God says, from now on, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Well, a part of it though, he to take her as a rival. For
Yeah.
some, he didn't have the best intentions when he did it.
Well,
Well, and I'm not talking about,
you mean Laban?
no, I'm not talking about Rachel and Leah and Laban's deal, but the way this is read, it said, you shall not take a woman as a rival to her sister.
Yeah, and that would be to vex her, to
Yeah.
put her in her place, to
Yeah.
upset her.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
you know, marrying both of them and treating them right would be one thing, but marrying one just to get at the other one,
yeah.
just to upset her, God's saying that this is just not right. And so these are the sexual laws that God put in place after Mount Sinai, starting at Mount Sinai. You could not marry certain, and you couldn't, it wasn't just about marriage, it was about sexual intercourse. You could not have relations with all these people on this list. Now, I want you to notice in all this long list of you shall nots, and you know, that uncover their nakedness, because that is kind of awkward. It will tell you, if you read it in the Home and Christian, don't have sexual intercourse, it would be a shame, or it would shame your brother-in-law, it would shame your father if you had sex with his other wife, you know, that kind of thing. It's a matter of what's right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. It may not be so much about the DNA as much about adultery and fornication and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And upset in the family.
Yeah, I think you're right in this case, but I want to get back to DNA for here. Did you notice in these, thou shalt not have relations with all these people? It did not mention marriages to first cousins. It didn't. They're not in there. Thus, and we can see this in the Bible, we see an example. The daughters of a man by the name of Zelophehad came and said, hey, we don't have any male heirs in our tribe, and our family name is going to be cut off. And so they came up with a plan. God said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to still marry within the tribe of Manasseh, and you can find that if you want to read it in Numbers 36, 9 through 12. But it doesn't violate the ordinances when they married their first cousins, and that's who they married, to keep the inheritance in their tribal grouping. So there's no mention of this being a special dispensation. God didn't say, okay, this one time.
Oh,
He didn't. He just said, okay, marry your cousins. And that's what they did. So I love my cousins, don't want to marry any of them. But the point is, why did God change and no longer allow marriage, or why did he to be prohibited between near kin? Well, first cousins are not near enough kin for it to be a problem, apparently. Changes in DNA probably became problematic, and birth defects and diseases and syndromes. But I want you to consider this, diseases. Let's go to Exodus chapter 15, and we'll read verses 23 through 26. Is it my turn to read? Phil's turn to read? Okay.
Exodus 15.
Exodus 15, verses 23 through 26.
And when they came to Moriah, they could not drink of the waters of Moriah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Moriah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet. There he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them, and said, if you will diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in his sight, and will give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that heals thee.
Did you catch that? If you keep my commandments and my statutes, none of the diseases that the Egyptians have are going to fall on you. I won't bring on you the diseases I brought on them. We don't know the diseases that the Egyptians were dealing with. But I can tell you this, anybody who was in the military and went overseas was warned about sexual activity and bringing home diseases with yourself. You know, if you've gone out and you got with some little French girl during World War II, or some a Vietnamese girl during the Vietnamese War, they warn you and they say, you know, there's all these diseases and you don't want to be exposed to those. God says, if you'll keep my commandments, I won't put any of these diseases I put on you. I suspect the Egyptians had some kind of diseases that were like what we would consider venereal diseases, that they suffered from.
Back, now, I don't know how it was after the Second World War, but when I came back from Korea, we had to go through a line and they checked us, and if you had some kind of infection, you didn't come home.
Wow. They keep you there till you're better?
Yeah. Now, I didn't know anybody that had to stay, but
Yeah.
that's what they did.
So God says, if you'll keep my commandments, I'll keep the diseases off of you. Probably all of us have heard about how the royal houses, and they're talking the British, the Scottish, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Austrians, all these royal houses tried to marry only other royals. And eventually they realized they had to cross lines, and they saw it as, being advantageous. Okay, if this prince marries a princess from Spain, and that makes an allegiance with Spain, and our nations can get along, or the French married to the English, they saw this as an opportunity for political gain, but they also were trying to vary their bloodline. They wanted to stay in royal bloodlines, but they wanted those Austrians to come over here to England because there was a little bit difference between their bloodline and the English bloodline, or Spanish, or the Portuguese.
But even now, if you notice in English, Charles married Diana, wasn't a part of the royalty, and he's hooked up now with whatever her name is.
Camilla.
William married Kate, which was a commoner, for lack of a better word, and then the other one got hooked up with that gal out in
Hollywood.
in Hollywood, where he might have been better off to marry his first cousin.
Well, they still do a lot of wheeling and dealing in the royal
Oh,
houses.
yeah, but
Trying to protect their
yeah,
heritage, I guess you'd say.
but they, the ones we're more familiar with married outside of the bloodline. Or at least in this generation.
Yeah, when Diana was married to Charles, she was way down the line, but she had some royal
Relation,
lineage.
yeah.
Yeah, she was of some house, and so that was why they wanted to
Okay.
to bring her in, and they promoted her to him as a possible wife.
Well, they're free to marry outside now, whereas at one time, those marriages were arranged by their parents or
A
whatever.
lot of it, yeah.
And
Yeah.
they had they kept the control there.
Yeah, that was, and control is a good way to put that. They controlled who married who, and then they could do their political allegiances and stuff, and their alliances with other nations based on this one marrying another royal from another country.
But even outside of that, I had a guy tell me one time, he knew a man that had an arranged marriage. And he said, did that bother you? He said, no, because I knew my parents were going to pick somebody that was compatible with me and good. And so there's a lot to be said for that, because as a 18 or 19-year-old, you don't have a whole lot of sense. But mom and daddy knows what you're capable of, knows what these young women are capable of, and if there's something to be said for it.
They say that our minds are not really adult until about age 26. So a whole lot of us
Or
got married as
66.
teenagers.
Or
you know.
66.
Some of us are not at 66. Hey, I resemble that.
Also, they didn't have the freedom to divorce back then either,
True,
that they have now.
true. Yeah, I remember on Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye and Golda, they've been dealing with their daughters, trying to get them married off, and they're dealing with, one of the daughters has found love. Well, you don't marry for love, you marry because you got an arranged marriage. And so they're in the house together, and says, Golda, do you love me? She says, love you? 25 years, I've cooked your food, I've cleaned your house. what's that? Is that not love? And it's a different way of thinking. We are
Yeah.
in the Western mindset now, and we are the norm now. The Western mindset is we just want to turn those raging hormones loose, and I'm afraid, and this goes back to what Townsend said, I'm afraid that contributes a great deal to the amount of failed marriages and divorces, because people get married and then they mature a little bit more and think, wait a minute, what have I done? And then they start saying, well, I want to make me happy. What have I done for me? And then next thing you know, they think God approves of it too, and they go off and leave their wife. And I think that's why the Bible says, remember the wife of your youth.
But that has basically been a problem since the 60s. In my generation, a lot of people got married right out of high school, stayed married till they was dead.
Yeah, well, it is not lost on anybody, I think, that the rate of divorce has skyrocketed
Oh, yeah.
since the 60s. And now they say more than 50% of marriages end in divorce.
And that doesn't even include the ones that don't get married but live
Right,
together.
a whole lot of people who just live together, right?
Playing house,
I'm sorry?
playing house.
Playing house, yeah. That was a joke. That was a joke when we were kids. Kids played house. But little girls also pushed bassinets and had baby dolls.
Mhm.
This is a different world, and I gotta believe the evil adversaries leaning back in his chair and just chuckling.
Mhm.
Look at what they're doing. That's not even my doing. They're doing that by themselves. I never even dreamed of that. I think that we are very creative creatures, and unfortunately, we create sinful situations and then think they're normal and roll around in them.
It's been my experience working for the public my whole life, that if you have a married couple, they can't always be trusted to do me right, you know. But if you're working for a couple that's just shacking up or playing house, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna try to rip you off or do you wrong. They're more scrupulous. They're not as moral.
They're unscrupulous.
But if you're shacked up, if they're shacked up before they're married, the odds of divorce go up.
Yes.
Even
Statistically,
if
they're
they get married,
much.
have to get married.
If they do get married, they'll
Yeah,
get
and the
divorced.
idea is, well,
Yeah.
we're trying each other on for size, and then eventually we'll get married if we decide it's gonna work out. But unfortunately, the statistics are against that. They're more likely to get divorced after living together than those who get married.
Some of the ones that I'm familiar with use that statistic to say, well, there's no reason to get married now.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll just stay like we are.
It's a losing proposition. Why get married? We'll just get divorced and have to fight over our stuff, right? Well, Lord willing, one of these days, the Messiah's gonna split the eastern sky, and he's gonna put an end to all this nonsense. And there'll be no more stumper questions, because he'll be sitting on the throne, and he can answer every question. And until then, don't answer a fool in his folly, lest you be like him, but then answer a fool in his folly, so he won't think he's wise in his conceit. So there we are.
My face said, what do you care? You go do, I'm gonna burn you, boy.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. For those of you who've been with us on the broadcast, thank you very much. We very much appreciate you taking the time to listen to our Bible study, whether you're hearing it live or looking at the recording later on. We are on our website, www.sdca.org, and also on YouTube. So look us up. You want to look up previous Bible studies or sermons, they're out there. So thanks you once again, and until next Wednesday night when we delve into another Bible study, God bless you.